The scene unfolds with Amy, a school administrator engrossed in her emails at her desk. Suddenly, a loud knock on the door interrupts her concentration.
Come on in.
Amy calls out, her voice echoing in the office. The door swings open, revealing a tall man in a suit.
Good morning. Are you Amy? Yes, and you are. Where are my manners? I'm Jonathan Dogg, the lawyer representing the state of Illinois. I'm here to deliver a notice informing you that you're being sued. Sued? I don't believe my special education program has done anything wrong. Oh, but it has. One of your employees, Mr. Rence, is a serious issue. He's been crashing his van into building after building. Wait, what? I only gave him that vehicle to transport students for their orientation and mobility lessons.
Jonathan pulls a document from his briefcase, ready to elaborate.
Let me share the details. He has crashed into Walmart twice, McDonald's, Burger King, a Subway, a Halloween store, several houses, the Chicago Mall, Yorktown Mall, and this very office building on multiple occasions. I can't believe I didn't notice. I'll address this immediately.
As Jonathan prepares to leave, he sets the court notice on Amy's desk. Just then, a loud crash reverberates through the office as a large blue van plows through the wall, sending a bookshelf tumbling onto Jonathan's head.
Hey, Amy, I'm here to drop off those papers you needed.
His gaze lands on the lawyer on the floor.
Who's this guy?
That guy is suing our program because of you.
Jonathan rises, confronting Mr. Rence.
So you're the menace wreaking havoc on the state. Just so you know, you're under investigation, and if found guilty, you could face jail time.
At that moment, 3 students, Colton, Zach, and Chris, emerge from the back of the van. Jonathan's eyes widen in realization.
Wait, you drove here and crashed into a building with 3 students inside? This escalates the situation from property damage to child endangerment. This is going to be a very bad day for you.
With that, Jonathan storms out of the office, slamming the door behind him. Amy turned to face Mr. Rence, her frustration boiling over.
What were you thinking? You can't just drive recklessly like that. I'm taking away your van keys permanently and you're never driving again.
But Miss Amy, we love the van. It can go supersonic speeds.
Yeah, and it can transform into a submarine, a helicopter, and even a spaceship. It's amazing.
We can go on all kinds of adventures. Please don't take it away.
You can't do this. The van is not just a vehicle, it's a part of our program. The kids rely on it for the special experiences we provide.
Amy crossed her arms, refusing to soften her stance.
You don't understand the severity of what's happening here. You're putting these kids in danger. Do you have any idea how reckless it is to drive like that?
But Miss Amy, we have so much fun. We can go anywhere. We can explore the ocean or fly high in the sky.
And you can't take that away from us. We love those trips.
Amy took a deep breath, trying to remain calm.
I appreciate that you enjoy the van, but the safety of these students comes first. I can't allow Mr. Rence to drive anymore if this is how it's going to be.
I promise I'll be more careful. Just give me one more chance.
Careful isn't enough. You've proven you can't handle this responsibility. I can't risk anyone getting hurt because of your recklessness.
The students looked disheartened, their excitement fading as Amy stood her ground. The room was heavy with tension as they all realized the gravity of the situation. But Amy remained resolute, determined to protect her students no matter the cost. Amy stepped forward, her expression unwavering.
I won't ask you again, Mr. Rence. Hand over your van keys now.
Mr. Rence shook his head vehemently, his hands clenching into fists.
You can't do this. The van is a vital part of our program. I promise I'll drive safely from now on. Just give me another chance.
I can't risk the safety of the students. You've already proven you're not responsible enough to handle that vehicle. It's time to face the consequences of your actions.
Colton, Zach, and Chris looked on, their expressions a mix of concern and confusion.
Please, Miss Amy, don't take the van away. It's not just a car. It's our gateway to adventure.
They're right. The van is special. We can't just lose it because of a few accidents. I'll make sure to drive carefully. Just let me keep the keys.
You don't understand how serious this is. If something happens again, it could have dire consequences, not just for you, but for the students as well.
With a deep breath, she stepped closer.
I'm giving you one last chance to hand over the keys voluntarily. If you refuse, I will have to escalate this further.
Mr. Rence's face turned red with frustration.
You're being unreasonable. You're punishing us for something that can be fixed. We all love that van.
You're not getting it. This isn't just about fun and games, it's about safety. If you truly care about these students, you'll understand why this has to happen.
Finally, with a heavy heart, Mr. Rence reluctantly reached into his pocket and pulled out the van keys, his expression a mix of defeat and anger.
I can't believe it's come to this.
Thank you. I hope you can reflect on this and understand why it was necessary.
As she turned away, the students' disappointed faces weighed heavily on her. She understood their love for the van, but she knew that in her role, she had to prioritize their safety above all else. As Amy turned to leave with the van keys in hand, Mr. Rence stepped forward, desperation etched on his face.
Please, Amy, you can't just drive it away like this. I'll change. I swear I will. Just give me another chance to show you.
Amy paused at the door of the van, her hand resting on the vehicle's side.
Mr. Rence, this isn't just about you anymore. The safety of the students has to come first. I can't let you drive until I know you can be responsible.
But the kids love the van. They look forward to every trip we take. You're not just taking away my keys, you're taking away their experiences.
I understand that. But what if something happens again? I can't bear the thought of any of them getting hurt. I'm taking the van to a holding garage until I can find a new orientation and mobility instructor who can ensure the safety of all involved.
Mr. Rence looked defeated, his shoulders slumping.
You don't have to do this. I promise I'll be better. I'll get training. I'll do whatever it takes.
This isn't just about promises. We need to establish a safe environment for everyone. You need to reflect on your actions, and I need to take the necessary steps to protect these students.
With that, she climbed into the driver's seat, starting the engine. The familiar roar of the van felt bittersweet. As she put it in gear, she glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the students, Colton, Zach, and Chris, standing by the sidewalk, their faces a mixture of sadness and confusion.
Miss Amy, please, we need the van.
Amy's heart ached, but she pressed on, determined to do what was right.
I'll make sure you have a new instructor soon, and I promise we'll work on finding a way to bring back those adventures safely.
As she drove away, she could still hear Mr. Rence's voice echoing behind her, pleading for another chance. The van rumbled down the road, taking a path toward the holding garage, while Amy steeled herself for the challenges that lay ahead. It wasn't just about the van, it was about ensuring a safe and secure environment for every student in her care. As Amy drove away, the sound of the van's engine faded into the distance.
What's so funny, Mr. Rence?
You guys won't believe this. I've programmed the van into my phone. I can command it to return to me whenever I want.
Really? How does it work?
All I have to do is enter a command. Just watch.
Mr. Rence grinned mischievously and entered a command, the screen lighting up with the words, "Return to base." As he pressed the button, he couldn't help but laugh again, imagining the look on Amy's face when she realized what was happening. Meanwhile, Amy was cruising down the open road, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. She glanced at the dashboard and took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing thoughts about the van and the students. Just then, she noticed the steering wheel beginning to pull to the right. "Amy, what the—" she gasped, gripping the wheel tighter as the van suddenly veered off course. Panic surged through her as she realized she was losing control. "Amy, no, no, no!" Amy cried, trying to correct the steering, but the van seemed to have a mind of its own. The vehicle began to turn around, heading back in the direction from which she had come. "Amy, this can't be happening!" she shouted, her heart racing as the realization hit her. Mr. Rence had somehow sent the command for the van to return.
Look, it's coming back.
Told you. Now we can continue our adventures.
Back on the sidewalk, Colton, Zach, and Chris watched in awe as the van, now a speck on the horizon, began to turn around and speed back toward them. As the van approached, Amy struggled to regain control, her mind racing with thoughts of how to stop this unexpected turn of events. She needed to figure out what Mr. Rence had done and how to regain control of the situation before it spiraled further out of hand. As the van sped back toward the sidewalk, Amy's heart raced. She desperately tried to regain control, but the steering seemed locked in place, unresponsive to her frantic attempts. "Amy, no, no, no!" she shouted, panic rising in her throat. Suddenly, the van's dashboard lit up with a message. "Enter password to override control." "Amy, what? A password?" Amy exclaimed, glancing at the screen in disbelief. "Amy, this isn't happening!" She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. "Amy, think. Amy, think." She remembered Mr. Rence's earlier boasting about how he had programmed the van. She needed to outsmart him. Racking her brain, she recalled the various conversations they'd had about the van. Mr. Rence had mentioned something about his favorite movies and jokes. Amy, could it be something related to that? She muttered, half to herself. She quickly tried a few combinations. Amy, supersonic, adventure, Rence rules. Each time, the screen flashed red, indicating the password was incorrect. Frustrated, she knew she had to come up with something before the van made it back to Mr. Rence. Just then, she remembered a conversation where Mr. Rence had joked about a famous quote from a classic movie. "Amy, may the force be with you," she shouted, typing in force as the password. The dashboard flickered, and then the message changed. "Access granted, control restored." "Amy, yes!" Amy exclaimed, the van finally responding to her commands. With a firm grip on the wheel, she turned it sharply, redirecting the vehicle off the road and into a nearby empty lot. She took a moment to collect herself, breathing heavily as the adrenaline coursed through her. "Amy, okay, I need to think this through," she said aloud, glancing at the rearview mirror where she could still see Mr. Rence, Colton, Zach, and Chris, their faces a mixture of confusion and excitement. Realizing she had to put an end to this situation once and for all, she pulled out her own phone and dialed for backup, determined to ensure that the van would be safe and that Mr. Rence wouldn't have the chance to pull another stunt. As she waited for the call to connect, she looked back at the kids and Mr. Rence. "Amy, this isn't over yet, and I'm not letting you back in that van until I can trust you," she shouted, her voice steady and resolute. With a plan forming in her mind, Amy focused on what to do next, ready to confront whatever challenges awaited her.
This time he programmed the van to engage supersonic mode.
A sly grin spread across his face as he hit the button, envisioning the chaos that would ensue. Back inside the van, Amy felt a sudden jolt, and the dashboard lit up with a warning. "Supersonic mode engaged." "Amy, what? No! Mr. Rence!" she shouted, realizing what he was attempting. The van surged forward, picking up speed at an alarming rate. The world outside blurred as the van shot down the road, leaving a trail of dust in its wake. "Amy, hang on!" she yelled, gripping the wheel as she fought to maintain control. The engine roared and the speedometer climbed into the red zone. The van wasn't just moving quickly, it was as if it were on a collision course for her office. "Amy, stop! Stop!" Amy screamed, desperately trying to override the command, but it was too late. The van barreled toward the intersection, heading directly toward the building where her office was located. As she approached the parking lot, she could see Mr. Rence and the students standing outside, their expressions shifting from excitement to shock as they realized what was about to happen. "Amy, get out of the way!" Amy yelled, her heart racing. With a deafening crash, the van skidded to a halt just inches from the entrance, sending a cloud of dust and debris flying into the air. Amy's breath caught in her throat as she processed the near disaster. She threw open the door and stormed out, her face flushed with anger. "Amy, Mr. Rence, this is absolutely unacceptable. You could have hurt someone." The student stood frozen, eyes wide as Mr. Rence approached, a mix of defiance and mischief in his eyes. "Mr. Rence, what? You were going to keep the van from us. I had to do something." Amy felt her frustration boiling over. "Amy, you don't get to put everyone's safety at risk just because you want to prove a point. This is not a game, Mr. Rence." Mr. Rence crossed his arms, a smirk still lingering on his face. "Mr. Rence? Well, it seems I got the van back, didn't I?" "Amy, not for long. I'm calling the authorities and I'm reporting this reckless behavior. You need to understand the seriousness of your actions." As she pulled out her phone again, the tension in the air thickened. The students exchanged glances, uncertain about the impending consequences, while Amy prepared to take a stand against Mr. Rence's antics once and for all. Zach, sensing the rising tension, stepped forward, a spark of inspiration lighting up his eyes. "Zach, wait, I have an idea," he exclaimed, gathering the attention of Colton, Chris, Mr. Rence, and even Amy. "Amy, what are you talking about? This isn't a game, Zach," Zach continued, undeterred. "Zach, what if we make it a game? Let's play a round of Uno. If you win, you can take the van away. But if we win, we get to keep it and Mr. Rence gets to be the instructor again." Mr. Rence perked up at the idea, his earlier frustration momentarily forgotten. "Mr. Rence, yeah, that sounds fair. An intense game of Uno to decide our fate." Amy shook her head, trying to maintain her authority. "Amy, this isn't how things work. I can't just gamble the safety of the students in the van over a card game." Just then, Mr. Dugan, a notoriously eccentric teacher known for his unpredictable behavior, strolled over. he asked, his voice low and gravelly. Zach, seeing an opportunity, quickly explained the situation. Zach, we're proposing a game of Uno to decide if we keep the van. It's fair, right? Mr. Dugan's eyes glinted with mischief as he leaned closer, brandishing the machete playfully. Mr. Dugan? I like the sound of that, but let's make it interesting. He pointed the machete at Amy, a wild grin on his face. Mr. Dugan, if you lose, you give the van back and let Mr. Rence take charge. If you win, fine, you keep the van. But if you lose, he leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Mr. Dugan, you'll have to face the consequences. Amy's eyes widened in disbelief. Amy, Mr. Dugan, you can't threaten me with that thing. This is ridiculous, Mr. Dugan. Ridiculous perhaps, but fun? Absolutely. Colton, Zach, and Chris exchanged excited glances, their adrenaline pumping at the thought of a high-stakes Uno match. Chris, come on, Miss Amy, it'll be fun, Chris urged, bouncing on his heels. Amy took a deep breath, weighing her options. The last thing she wanted was to engage in a ridiculous game, but with Mr. Dugan's unexpected support, she realized she had little choice. Amy, fine, one game of Uno, but if I win, Mr. Rence is done driving and I'll be taking the van to the garage for good. Zach, deal, Zach shouted, his excitement infectious. The group quickly gathered around, ready for the showdown that would determine the fate of the van, tension in the air palpable as they prepared to play. As they shuffled the cards, Amy couldn't shake the feeling that things were spiraling out of control, but she steeled herself for the challenge ahead, determined to protect her students and keep the van away from Mr. Rence. The stakes were high, and the game was about to begin. As the group huddled together, Colton leaned in closer to Mr. Dugan, a mischievous glint in his eye. Colton, hey Mr. Dugan, what if you were to be our referee and help us out a little? Mr. Dugan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Mr. Dugan, help you out how? He asked, twirling the machete absent-mindedly. Zach jumped in, excitement bubbling over. Zach, we want you to make sure Amy doesn't get any good cards. Just give her numbers, nothing special, maybe even a bunch of low-value cards. That way we can make sure we win. Chris nodded vigorously. Chris, and you can give us the good cards, the wilds, and the skips so we can dominate the game. Mr. Rence, trying to contain his enthusiasm, added, Mr. Rence, come on, Dugan, you'd be doing us a favor. We could really use your unique talents to tip the odds in our favor. Mr. Dugan's eyes lit up with a maniacal grin. Mr. Dugan, you want me to rig the game? I like the sound of that. It'll be just like old times, a bit of chaos and fun. Colton, exactly. And you can be the referee so everything looks legit. Just make sure Amy has a terrible hand. If we win, the van stays with us. Mr. Dugan rubbed his chin thoughtfully, then nodded vigorously. Mr. Dugan, all right, I'm in. Just leave it to me. I'll make sure that this game goes exactly how we want it to. Zach, perfect, Zach said, a sense of triumph washing over the group. They quickly prepared for the game, while Mr. Dugan took the deck of Uno cards and shuffled them with exaggerated flair. As he began to deal, he made sure to stack the deck in favor of Colton, Zach, Chris, and Mr. Rence, while deliberately handing Amy low-value number cards. Mr. Dugan, oh, look at this! You've got a great hand, Amy. Just a few more cards and you'll be set. Amy, unaware of the scheme unfolding before her, looked at her cards and frowned. Amy, why do I only have numbers? Where are the action cards, Mr. Dugan? Just luck of the draw. Let's get started, shall we? As the game began, the atmosphere was electric. The stakes were high and the tension palpable, but beneath the surface, a devious plan was in motion. The group was ready to play dirty to ensure their victory, and Amy was about to find herself in a game where the odds were stacked against her.
Dugan dramatically flipped over the top card of the deck, and a loud gasp escaped the group. The card was a wild, an Uno card that could change the color of play at any moment. The tension in the air crackled with excitement as the game officially began.
All right, everyone, let the chaos commence.
Mr. Dugan declared with a flourish, reveling in his role as the referee. He pointed at Zach, signaling him to go first.
I choose red.
Zach, a mischievous grin plastered on his face, quickly played the wild card, changing the color and kicking off the game with a significant advantage. As the game continued, Zach, Colton and Chris played their turns with increasing confidence, throwing down action cards and skips that Mr. Dugan had slyly dealt them. Meanwhile, Amy struggled with her hand, feeling the weight of the low-number cards as they piled up in front of her.
Come on, Amy, you can do it.
Mr. Dugan said, feigning encouragement while secretly relishing the chaos he had helped create.
Just play a card.
As the game progressed, it became increasingly clear that the odds were heavily in favor of Zach, Colton and Chris. They cheered and exchanged high fives, while Amy's frustration grew, her competitive spirit igniting as she fought to keep her composure.
Just wait until I draw something good.
She retorted, determined not to let them see her give up. But deep down she felt the unfairness of the game weighing on her, and she began to suspect that something was off. As the round continued, the stakes rose higher, and with every turn Mr. Dugan's maniacal grin grew wider. Would Amy be able to turn the tide, or was the game already lost before it had truly begun? As the rounds continued, Amy's frustration transformed into desperation. She watched in disbelief as Zach effortlessly played a skip, followed by Colton throwing down a draw-4 card, leaving her with even fewer options. Each turn felt like a personal defeat, and she could feel the walls closing in around her.
Seriously, another skip?
Amy exclaimed, slapping her hand on the table. Her heart raced as she scanned her cards again, hoping for a miracle.
This is ridiculous?
Mr. Dugan, playing his role perfectly, feigned concern. Come on, Amy, you've got to keep your head in the game. Just remember, it's all in good fun.
Good fun? You're all working together to make sure I lose. This isn't how Uno is supposed to work.
You know what? This isn't fair. I want to call a timeout. Mr. Dugan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. A timeout? You sure you want to do that? It might not help your case.
I don't care. I'm not letting you cheat me out of this.
Amy shouted, her voice firm. The game was spiraling out of control, but perhaps she could still find a way to fight back. She just needed to buy herself some time. Amy took a deep breath, her heart pounding as she pointed an accusing finger at Mr. Dugan.
This whole thing is rigged. You're giving them the best cards while I'm stuck with these terrible numbers. You're supposed to be the referee. How is this fair?
Mr. Dugan's expression shifted from playful to defensive. Rigged? Me? You must be imagining things, Amy. You're just not playing well enough. He crossed his arms, his demeanor shifting to one of indignation, but a flicker of guilt crossed his eyes.
Just then, the door swung open and in walked Miss Peel, an O&M instructor known for her sharp wit and keen observations. She immediately sensed the tension in the room. What's going on here?
Amy thinks the game is rigged, Mr. Dugan replied, trying to sound casual but failing to mask the anxiety in his voice.
Miss Peel raised an eyebrow, her gaze darting to Amy. And do you think it is?
Yes! I've been getting nothing but bad cards while they're all winning, Amy exclaimed, her frustration spilling over. Mr. Dugan is clearly helping them.
Mr. Dugan scoffed. That's absurd. You're just upset because you're losing.
But Miss Peel's piercing gaze turned to Mr. Dugan, a smirk creeping onto her face. You know, I've heard some interesting things about this game. It seems the word on the street is that you've been playing favorites.
The group looked at her in surprise, confusion etched on their faces. How would you know that? Chris asked, skepticism in his tone. You haven't even been here.
Miss Peel leaned against the wall, crossing her arms. I may not have been here, but I've seen the results of your little game. You think it's a secret? The way Mr. Rence flaunts that van of his, it's hard for the rest of us not to notice. He's got a lot of people jealous of that prize.
Amy's eyes widened. So you're saying you believe me?
Absolutely, Miss Peel said, her tone shifting to one of certainty. I've seen how Mr. Dugan operates. He's got a knack for bending the rules when it suits him, especially when he's feeling threatened. And let's face it, you and your friends are in a pretty good position to win that van.
The group exchanged glances, a mix of hope and uncertainty. If Miss Peel believed Amy, maybe there was a chance to turn the game around.
Okay, but how can we prove it? Colton asked, his voice tinged with urgency.
Miss Peel smiled knowingly. We'll need to change the game. I'll oversee the rest of the match and we'll shuffle the deck again. If Dugan's been rigging it, we'll find out for sure.
Mr. Dugan's face paled slightly, realizing his scheme was unraveling.
You can't just change the rules midway through, he protested. but the determination in Miss Peel's eyes silenced him.
Actually, I can.
With a renewed sense of hope, Amy and her friends rallied together, ready to reclaim the game and expose the truth. The tension in the room shifted as Miss Peel prepared to take control, and Amy felt a rush of adrenaline. Perhaps this battle wasn't over just yet.
As the tension in the room escalated, Chris leaned closer to Mr. Rence, his voice barely above a whisper. Should we tell Amy about our superpowers? I mean, if we explain that the van isn't just for trips but also for fighting crime, maybe we could call the Hero League. Carl could buy the van from her and we could get it back.
Mr. Rence hesitated, glancing around the room as if weighing the consequences of such a revelation. "I'm against this, Chris," he whispered back, urgency lacing his tone. "The Hero League's powers are meant to be used in extreme situations. This isn't serious enough. We can still manage this without revealing our identities."
But what if Miss Peel doesn't see it our way? Chris pressed, concern etched on his face. What if she doesn't let us play fairly? We could be lost in this game forever.
Mr. Rence shook his head, his expression firm. "Trust me, we've dealt with worse. I know Miss Peel. I've worked with her for years, and I can assure you that she won't let anything truly unfair slide. We just need to play smart. Cheating might still be our best option."
Chris frowned, sensing the conflict within his mentor. But if we don't tell her, and she finds out later, it could backfire badly. What if she feels betrayed?
"Then we'll figure it out later," Mr. Rence replied, his voice low but insistent. "For now, let's keep our cards close to our chests. We can still win this game without tipping our hand. Trust me on this."
As the group prepared for the next round, Chris reluctantly nodded, though doubt gnawed at him. He could feel the stakes rising, not just for the game, but for everything they stood to lose. The thought of keeping their powers hidden felt heavy, and he wondered if they could really manage the situation without revealing their true identities. Meanwhile, Amy and the others were discussing strategies, unaware of the secret conversation taking place just a few feet away. Miss Peel stepped forward, ready to shuffle the deck, and Chris knew they had to focus. The game was about to take a new turn, and he hoped it wouldn't be their last chance to reclaim the van or their dignity. As the cards were shuffled and dealt again, Chris felt the weight of his decision. They might not have revealed their powers yet, but he knew that if things went south, they would have to act quickly. The stakes had never felt higher, and the true test was just beginning.
As the next round began, Mr. Dugan sulked in the corner, his arms crossed and a frown etched on his face. He knew the odds were against him now that Miss Peel was overseeing the game, and the thought of losing his grip on the situation dug at his pride. Meanwhile, Colton, Zach, Chris and Mr. Rence huddled together, their voices low and conspiratorial as they devised their strategy.
"Okay, we need to come up with a plan,"
Colton said, glancing warily at Miss Peel.
"She's going to be watching us closely, but we can't let her ruin our chances."
Zach nodded, his eyes gleaming with mischief.
"What if we distract her, like make her focus on something else while we slip in a few extra cards?"
Mr. Rence shook his head, his expression serious.
That might be risky. We don't want to give her any reason to kick us out of the game. We need something more subtle.
Chris, still feeling the weight of their secret, chimed in.
What if we played it like a team? We could communicate through subtle signals, like how we used to do before anyone knew about our powers.
"Yeah, but with her watching us, we have to be careful. We can't let her catch on."
Mr. Rence suggested, his eyes narrowing with determination.
Let's see if we can create some chaos. If we can get Miss Peel distracted with something else, it might give us the opportunity we need. Maybe we can make a big deal out of something trivial.
Zach grinned.
"What if I accidentally spill my drink? That'll definitely get her attention."
Chris agreed, a spark of excitement igniting.
That could work. While she's busy cleaning up, we can slip in a few extra cards or switch hands.
Mr. Rence nodded, a plan forming in his mind.
All right, let's do this. We'll play it cool, but we need to act fast. The moment she turns her back, that's our chance.
With their strategy set, the group felt a renewed sense of confidence, ready to outmaneuver Miss Peel despite her watchful eye. As the game resumed, they exchanged knowing glances, each of them aware of the risk but also the thrill of bending the rules to their favor. Mr. Dugan, still sulking in the corner, shot them a resentful glare, but the group was too focused to notice. They were determined to reclaim the game, and ultimately the van, no matter what it took. As the game resumed, Zack took a deep breath, his heart racing with the thrill of the plan. He carefully positioned his drink, a vibrant blue concoction that looked suspiciously similar to a sports drink, right at the edge of the table.
All right, here goes nothing.
He whispered to Colton and Chris, who were watching intently. With an exaggerated gesture, Zack leaned forward as if he were stretching to get a better look at his cards, and in one swift motion, he knocked the drink over, sending the liquid cascading across the table.
Oh no, I'm so sorry,
he exclaimed, feigning panic. The vibrant blue liquid splattered across the table, splashing onto the cards and creating a scene of chaos. Miss Peel immediately turned her attention away from the game, her eyes wide with alarm.
Zack, watch where you're going!
She scolded, rushing to grab some napkins from the side table. As she bent down to clean up the spill, Chris, Colton and Mr. Rence exchanged quick glances, their hearts pounding with anticipation. This was their moment.
Now,
Mr. Rence hissed under his breath, and the three of them sprang into action. Chris quickly leaned over to grab a couple of extra cards from the deck, deftly slipping them into his hand, while Colton and Mr. Rence created a barrier of conversation to distract Miss Peel further.
Zack, you really need to be more careful. We can't let this game get ruined because of one clumsy mistake.
Yeah, I didn't mean to. I was just trying to get a better look.
As Miss Peel continued to clean up the mess, her focus fully on Zack, the trio worked efficiently, slipping their extra cards into their hands and adjusting their strategies without raising any suspicion. Just as they felt confident they had managed to pull it off, Miss Peel stood up, wiping her hands on a napkin and giving Zack a stern look.
All right, let's get back to it. And no more accidents, understood?
Zack nodded vigorously, a sheepish smile on his face.
Absolutely, I promise.
With Miss Peel now watching the game closely again, the group felt a rush of adrenaline. They had successfully executed their plan and gained a slight edge. Now it was time to see if it would pay off in their pursuit of victory, and the van. As the round progressed, the group began to play their hands with renewed confidence. Each move calculated as they relied on their secret signals and newfound advantage. The thrill of the game, combined with the risk they had taken, fueled their determination to win. The atmosphere around the table shifted. What had begun as a fun competition was now laced with desperation. She was racking up points with every hand, her confidence soaring as she played each round with skill and finesse. As the game progressed, it became painfully clear that Amy was on a winning streak.
We can't let her win.
Chris, Colton and Zack exchanged worried glances.
We need to do something.
It was then that Mr. Dugan, still sulking and observing from a distance, approached the group with a sly grin.
I've got an idea. What if we sneak a laxative into Amy's drink? It'll definitely throw her off her game.
The suggestion hung in the air, met with a mixture of shock and hesitation from the group.
No way, that's too far. We're not going to sabotage her like that.
Yeah, that's just wrong.
But Mr. Dugan, undeterred, leaned in closer, lowering his voice.
Look, I get it. It sounds harsh, but we're desperate. She's running away with this, and we can't let her win. Just think about it. One little dose, and she'll be out of the game for sure.
Colton frowned, torn between his morals and the competitive spirit ignited within him.
I mean, it's not like we're really hurting her. Just giving her a little nudge.
After a moment of silence, Mr. Rence, who had been quietly observing the back and forth, sighed heavily.
I can't believe we're even considering this. But if we're going to do this, it has to be done discreetly.
With a reluctant agreement forming among the group, Mr. Dugan produced a tiny laxative pill from his pocket, holding it up like a trophy.
Here, I'll give it to you, Mr. Rence. You're the one who can get it into her drink without raising suspicion.
Mr. Rence looked at the tiny pill in disbelief.
This feels wrong.
But the pressure from the others was palpable. They were all counting on him to make the call.
Just think of it as a tactical maneuver for the greater good of our team.
With a heavy heart, Mr. Rence took the laxative from Mr. Dugan, weighing the moral implications against the desperate need to win. He knew they were crossing a line, but the thought of losing to Amy, of letting her claim victory, felt unbearable. As the game continued, and Amy remained blissfully unaware of the brewing plot against her, Mr. Rence's mind raced. He had to find the right moment to slip the laxative into her drink, but the clock was ticking, and the stakes had never felt higher. Would they go through with it, or was there still a chance to turn the game around without resorting to such drastic measures? As the tension in the air grew thicker, Mr. Dugan seized the moment to create a diversion.
Hey, Miss Peel, if you could be any animal for a day, what would you choose and why?
Miss Peel turned her attention to him, momentarily caught off guard by the randomness of the question.
Excuse me, what kind of question is that?
Just think about it. Imagine the freedom of being a bird, soaring through the sky, or a dolphin swimming through the ocean. What would you pick?
While Miss Peel became embroiled in this ridiculous line of questioning, Mr. Rence saw his chance. Heart racing, he edged closer to Amy, who was still focused on her cards. He glanced back to ensure Miss Peel was sufficiently distracted, laughing at Dugan's silly antics. With a deep breath, Mr. Rence carefully approached Amy's drink, which was sitting on the table beside her. He felt the weight of the tiny laxative pill in his palm, and for a split second he hesitated, questioning the morality of his actions. But the thought of losing the game and the van spurred him on. In one quick motion, he leaned over and dropped the pill into the drink, watching as it sank to the bottom. He quickly straightened up, trying to appear casual, as if he had been merely adjusting the tablecloth.
Wow, that's a tough choice. I suppose I'd have to choose something like a fox, clever and agile.
Exactly, and just think of all the sneaky things you could do.
With the distraction working effectively, Mr. Rence felt a rush of relief, mixed with guilt. He had done it. Now, all they could do was wait and see how it would affect Amy's game. As the round continued, Amy remained blissfully unaware of the brewing storm, her focus unwavering. The tension among the group was palpable. They were now all invested in the outcome of this risky maneuver. Would it work? Would Amy falter? With Mr. Dugan still bantering with Miss Peel, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. The game was about to take a turn, and everyone was on edge, waiting for the fallout. As the game resumed, Amy, still riding high on her winning streak, reached for her drink. Unbeknownst to her, the tiny laxative pill had already begun dissolving at the bottom, ready to unleash its effects. With a cheerful smile, she lifted the vibrant blue concoction to her lips and took a big sip. The group watched with bated breath, tension crackling in the air. At first, Amy seemed oblivious, her attention focused on her cards, but within moments a subtle change washed over her face. She blinked, her expression shifting from confidence to confusion.
Is it just me, or is it getting a little warm in here?
She remarked, fanning herself lightly as she set her drink down. The group exchanged glances, a mix of excitement and anxiety coursing through them. Mr. Rence felt a knot form in his stomach. Had they gone too far? He wanted to reach out and warn her, but the look of determination on his friends' faces silenced his conscience. They needed to win, and this was their only shot. Suddenly, Amy's eyes widened, and she shifted in her seat, looking increasingly uncomfortable.
I think I need a moment,
she said, her voice laced with urgency. The others leaned in, feigning innocence while their hearts raced.
Are you okay? You seem a little pale.
I just need to... I'll be right back.
As she dashed toward the restroom, the table erupted into a mix of laughter and nervous chatter. The group couldn't believe their luck.
That worked better than I expected. Now we just have to hold our ground until she gets back.
Mr. Rence, however, couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in his gut.
What if she figures out what happened? This isn't right. We should have just played fair. Too late for that now. Let's just keep playing and make sure we take advantage of our lead.
As they resumed the game, Mr. Rence found it hard to concentrate. He could only think about Amy and how she was feeling. He hoped she wouldn't be too upset when she found out what had happened. Minutes felt like hours as they played on, each hand filled with tension. The sound of Amy's footsteps echoed through the hallway as she returned, looking flustered but determined. The group quickly masked their expressions, pretending everything was normal.
What'd I miss?
Just the usual, a few hands here and there. Want to jump back in?
As the game continued, the group was left wondering, would Amy's unexpected turn of events lead to her downfall? Or would she rise to the challenge and turn the game around? Amy's discomfort was evident as she shifted in her seat, her face slightly flushed.
I'm really sorry, guys. I just don't feel well. I think I need to use the bathroom again. I can't continue this game like this.
She glanced at her drink, uncertainty clouding her eyes.
I can't continue this game like this.
The group exchanged glances, a mix of concern and triumph. They had been caught off guard by Amy's sudden turn, but the implications were clear. She was still leading, having won the most hands, and the van would rightfully remain with her unless the game was officially over.
Hey, if she can't continue, what do we do about the game? We still have rounds left to play and we need someone to step in.
Well, how about Miss Peel? She can jump in for Amy. That way we can keep playing and still meet the rules. We can't just let her walk away with the van without a proper fight.
The suggestion hung in the air for a moment, and Miss Peel, who had been watching the whole situation unfold, raised an eyebrow.
Wait, do you want me to jump into a game that's already in progress? Isn't that a bit unconventional?
Unconventional, sure, but necessary. We need someone to compete. The rules say someone has to reach 500 points, and we're not there yet.
Amy, still looking pale, nodded slightly, though it was clear she wasn't entirely on board.
I guess if it's the only way to keep the game going, I don't mind. But I really can't stay much longer. I just don't feel like myself.
All right then. Miss Peel, are you up for it?
She chuckled lightly, a twinkle of mischief in her eyes.
Well, I suppose I can give it a shot. Just know that I'm not responsible for any wild shenanigans that might happen.
With a renewed sense of purpose, the group set up the game for Miss Peel to take Amy's place. They shuffled the cards and reset the points, eager to see if she could turn the tides in their favour. As Miss Peel settled in, the atmosphere shifted once more. The stakes had risen and the group felt a surge of hope. Perhaps with her cleverness and wit, she could help them secure a victory after all. Meanwhile, Amy, still feeling unwell, excused herself from the table to find a quiet spot to collect her thoughts. She couldn't shake the feeling that something strange was afoot. As she leaned against the wall in the restroom, she wondered if she'd ever be able to trust her friends again afterward. Little did she know the game was far from over and the twists were just beginning.
As Miss Peel prepared to take her seat, Mr. Dugan raised a finger in the air, a sly grin forming on his face.
Hold on a second. Since Miss Peel is stepping in for Amy, we've got a little problem. Who's going to be the referee? We can't have a game without someone making sure the rules are followed.
The group fell silent, the implications of Dugan's words sinking in. Miss Peel crossed her arms, her expression turning defensive.
Wait a minute, Dugan, you can't be serious about this. You're clearly on Mr. Rence's side. How am I supposed to trust you as a referee?
Dugan shrugged nonchalantly, a mischievous twinkle in his eye.
Well, you don't have a choice, do you? Unless you want to call it quits and let Amy take the van without a proper fight. We need a referee, and you know as well as I do that we don't have anyone else to call.
Miss Peel opened her mouth to protest, but quickly realised he was right. The weight of the situation pressed down on her. There was no one else available to step in. Reluctantly, she sighed, her resolve wavering.
Fine. If we have to have a referee, I guess it has to be you. But just know I'll be watching you very closely. Hey, I'll be fair, I promise. I just want to see a good game. And besides, it's not like I'm the one playing.
As Miss Peel took her seat, Dugan stood up, adjusting his imaginary referee's shirt and blowing an invisible whistle.
All right, everyone. Let's keep it clean and fair. Remember, we're aiming for 500 points here, and I'll be keeping an eye on everything.
The game resumed, and as the cards were dealt, Miss Peel felt a rush of adrenaline. She knew she was now part of a high-stakes battle, with Amy's fate and the van hanging in the balance. Mr. Rence, sitting across from her, flashed a confident smile. With every hand played, tension mounted. Dugan kept a sharp eye on the game, but his antics and jokes ensured that the atmosphere remained lively. Miss Peel played strategically, trying to navigate the balance between competition and camaraderie. As the rounds unfolded, scores climbed, and Miss Peel found herself more invested than she had anticipated. With each point gained, she could feel the weight of the group's expectations on her shoulders, especially as Amy's absence loomed over the table. Would she be able to hold her own and help secure the victory? Or would Dugan's playful meddling and Mr. Rence's strategies lead them to triumph? The game was far from over, and the stakes had never been higher. As the game progressed, Colton, Zach, Chris, and Mr. Rence started to find their rhythm once again. With each hand that was played, they scored points with surprising ease, and their confidence began to swell. Colton played a particularly clever hand that caught Miss Peel off guard, earning a round of applause from the group.
Nice one, Colton.
We're finally making a comeback.
Miss Peel felt a knot tightening in her stomach. As she glanced at the scoreboard, she could see the numbers climbing in favour of the guys. They were getting dangerously close to that 500-point mark, and the pressure was mounting. She couldn't let them take the van from Amy. Not after everything that had happened.
Come on, I need to focus.
She muttered under her breath, trying to shake off the nerves. She had to remind herself why she was there, to win for Amy. It was a heavy burden, and the stakes felt even higher with Mr. Dugan watching her every move.
Hey, Miss Peel, you don't want to let your team down, do you? We're counting on you.
She shot him a glare, but inside, the comment struck a nerve. If she didn't step up her game soon, they'd be handing the van to Dugan and the others without a fight. As the next round began, Miss Peel took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She shuffled her cards with determination, her mind racing as she plotted her strategy. She had to be smart, calculating every move. But just as she began to feel a sense of control, Colton played a particularly bold hand, racking up even more points and pushing the group closer to victory.
Look at us go!
He cheered, and the others chimed in with enthusiasm. Miss Peel could feel the pressure building like a tidal wave.
I can't let this happen,
she thought, her heart racing. She needed to find a way to turn the tide in her favour, and fast. As the game continued, the tension in the room escalated. The banter and laughter from the guys felt like a taunt, a reminder of the stakes at play. She took a moment to glance at the scoreboard again, her heart sinking at the sight.
All right, Miss Peel, time to step it up,
she whispered to herself. Determination igniting within, she had to channel her anxiety into focus. With Amy's fate resting on her shoulders, she couldn't afford to back down now. With renewed resolve, she played her next hand with precision, carefully calculating each move. The game was far from over, and Miss Peel knew she had to give it everything she had. Would she be able to pull off a victory for Amy? Or would Dugan and the others claim the prize? The outcome was hanging by a thread, and every decision mattered. As the game progressed, the atmosphere grew charged with anticipation. Miss Peel felt the stakes rising, and her determination solidified into a fierce resolve. She focused intently on her cards, knowing that every move could make or break her chances. Then came the moment that would change the tide of the game. Mr. Rence, grinning mischievously, played a draw 4 card, sending a ripple of excitement through the group.
Looks like I'm in the lead, Miss Peel. What are you going to do about it?
Without missing a beat, she shot back. Miss Peel, I'll stack it! She played her own draw, 4 atop his, and the game suddenly erupted into a stacking war. The tension in the room heightened as the others leaned in, fascinated by the unfolding battle. Rence's eyes gleamed with competitive spirit.
Oh, you want to play that way? Fine by me.
He stacked another draw 4, sending the tally soaring higher. As they continued to stack draw after draw, the stakes became ridiculous. Each time Miss Peel thought she had the upper hand, Rence countered with another draw 4, the tension palpable as the points and cards piled up. Finally, the inevitable happened. Miss Peel was pushed to the brink, and with a sinking feeling in her stomach, she realized she had run out of draw 4s. Miss Peel. No, 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 she muttered, her heart racing as she reached for the deck. Rence smirked triumphantly.
Looks like you'll be drawing 60 cards. That's a hefty load, Miss Peel.
With a defeated sigh, she shuffled through the deck, drawing cards one by one as the others watched, some chuckling at the absurdity of it all. Her hands trembled as she counted the cards, feeling each one weighing down her chances of winning. It was a crushing blow, not just in points, but to her morale as well.
Looks like you just handed me the game, Peel.
He taunted, his confidence soaring as he watched her stack grow. The rest of the group shared in the excitement, their spirits lifted by the unexpected turn of events. Miss Peel, however, felt the pressure intensify. With 60 cards in her hand, she needed to strategize carefully. She couldn't let this setback crush her. Miss Peel, I still have a chance. I just need to play smart. As the game continued, she resolved to find a way to leverage her new cards. Maybe there were hidden gems among them that could turn the tides back in her favor. With a renewed sense of purpose, she strategized her next moves, refusing to give up hope for Amy's sake. The game was still in motion, and anything could happen. As Miss Peel struggled to regain her footing, Zach leaned forward with a glint of mischief in his eyes.
All right, I think it's time to seal the deal,
he declared, gathering a powerful hand. The tension in the room thickened as everyone turned their attention to him, sensing the impending climax of the game. Zach played a series of cards with precision, each one stacking perfectly to build his score.
Let's see how you handle this,
he said, laying down a combination of high-value cards that sent shockwaves through the table. The others cheered him on, their excitement palpable. Miss Peel's heart sank as she watched the points accumulate. Miss Peel? No, not like this, she thought, desperately searching her hand for a way to counter his move. But the cards she had drawn were a jumble of low numbers and mismatched suits, offering her little hope. With each card Zach played, the score climbed higher. Finally, he laid down his last card, a powerful play that pushed the group over the 500-point threshold.
And that's game,
he announced, throwing his hands up in victory as the rest of the group erupted into cheers. Miss Peel felt a wave of defeat wash over her. She had fought so hard for Amy, but it all came crashing down with Zach's triumphant move. Miss Peel, I can't believe it, she whispered, staring at the table in disbelief. Mr. Rence leaned back, smirking.
Looks like we have a winner. And it's not you, Miss Peel. Better luck next time.
As the laughter and congratulations filled the room, Miss Peel's mind raced. She had given it her all and yet had come up short. The van, the hopes of Amy, everything seemed to slip through her fingers all at once.
Don't worry, Miss Peel. It was a great game.
But she could hardly hear him over the rush of disappointment. She had wanted this win not just for herself, but for Amy. And now, with the group celebrating their victory, she felt lost.
All right, let's not forget the real reason we're here. While we may have won this battle, we can always have a rematch. And who knows, maybe next time you'll be the one with the upper hand.
Miss Peel forced a smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. Miss Peel, yeah, maybe, she replied, her mind still racing with what-ifs. She would have to regroup and come back stronger next time. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a new challenge. As the celebration continued, Miss Peel made a silent promise to herself. She would do whatever it took to support Amy and reclaim that van, even if it meant facing Mr. Rence and his team again. Resilience was key, and she was more determined than ever to come out on top in the next game.
The sun was setting as Colton, Zach, Chris, and Mr. Rence pulled up to Amy's house. The atmosphere was charged with a mix of excitement and triumph from their recent victory. They hopped out of the car, their spirits high as they approached the front door, Mr. Rence leading the way.
All right, let's get those van keys.
He said, a mischievous smile spreading across his face. The others chuckled, their energy infectious as they knocked on the door.
Hey guys, what's going on?
She asked, glancing at the group's animated faces.
We won the game, so we're here to collect the van keys.
Just then, Miss Peel pulled up, her heart racing as she approached the scene. She could see the group gathered around Amy, and the weight of her earlier defeat pressed down on her like a heavy fog. She took a deep breath, knowing she had to face the music. As she reached the group, Amy's eyes widened in realization.
Miss Peel, did you lose?
I did. I'm so sorry, Amy. I tried my best, but they played really well, and I just couldn't keep up.
Colton stepped forward, trying to ease the tension.
Look, we didn't want it to come to this, but a deal's a deal. We won fair and square.
That's right. We're just here to collect the keys, Amy. It's only fair.
Amy's expression hardened as she processed the situation.
You guys can't just come here and take my van. That's not how this works.
Miss Peel felt a wave of guilt wash over her.
I'm really sorry, Amy. I thought I could win for you. I didn't want this to happen.
But I need that van.
Zach exchanged glances with the others, uncertainty creeping into their demeanor.
We didn't mean to put you in this position. It was just a game. Yeah, maybe we can figure something out.
As the group stood there, the tension palpable, Miss Peel felt a flicker of hope.
Maybe we could have a rematch, she proposed hesitantly. If I can team up with Amy this time, we can take you guys down for good.
Mr. Rence scoffed, but the glimmer of interest in Zach's eyes suggested he was open to the idea.
A rematch, huh? That could be interesting, he said, considering the possibility.
Amy looked between Miss Peel and her friends, her expression softening.
If we do a rematch, we need to make it clear that the van isn't just a trophy. It's something I need. If we win, we keep the van, and if you win, then you get the keys.
The others nodded, realizing that this could be a fair compromise.
All right, let's do it, Colton said, a determined grin forming on his face. Rematch it is.
With a plan in place, Miss Peel felt a surge of determination. She wasn't out of the game just yet. Together with Amy, they would strategize and prepare for the battle ahead. It was time to reclaim the van and show the others what they were truly capable of. Mr. Rence crossed his arms, a smug smile playing at the corners of his mouth.
Now, hold on a second, everyone, he said, his tone dripping with condescension. Let's not get ahead of ourselves with this rematch talk. The van is mine. It always has been.
Amy's frustration bubbled up again.
What do you mean it's yours? We had a deal.
Mr. Rence waved his hand dismissively.
You only want to take it away because you're jealous of the supersonic speeds it can reach. Everyone knows you've always wanted a van like this, and now you're just trying to take it from me.
Miss Peel stepped forward, her resolve hardening.
This isn't about jealousy, Rence. It's about fairness. The game was supposed to be a way to settle things, and if we have a rematch, it should be a clean slate.
Rence laughed, a sharp sound that cut through the tension.
Clean slate? Please. You and Miss Peel don't stand a chance in a rematch. You're both out of your league. I've got the strategy, the experience, and you know it. The van is mine until the rematch happens, and even then, I doubt you'll pull off a win.
Amy clenched her fists, anger boiling in her veins.
This isn't right. You can't just hold it over our heads because you think you're better. We want a fair chance.
Miss Peel could see the determination in Amy's eyes and felt her own resolve strengthen. We'll show you, Rence. Just wait until we strategize. You underestimate us, and that's going to be your downfall.
Rence shrugged, still wearing that arrogant grin. Good luck with that. I'll be waiting and I'll be ready. Just remember, the van stays with me for now. You can plan all you want, but I doubt it'll change the outcome.
With that, he turned on his heel, motioning for the others to follow him. As they walked away, the tension in the air lingered.
Amy looked at Miss Peel, her eyes filled with determination. We have to come up with a solid plan. We can't let him walk all over us like this.
Miss Peel nodded, a fire igniting within her. We'll show them that we're a force to be reckoned with. Let's meet up and brainstorm our strategy. We can't let Rence get away with this.
As they began to formulate their plan, a sense of camaraderie blossomed between them. They would not only fight for the van, but also for their dignity, determined to prove that they were more than just the underdogs in this game. The rematch was on, and they would prepare to give it everything they had.
As the group turned to leave, Colton lingered for a moment, glancing back at Amy and Miss Peel. "Hey, we still need those van keys, Amy," he said, his tone firm.
Amy felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She had hoped to hold on to the keys a little longer to have something to bargain with, but she could see Colton's determination, and she knew that without those keys, Rence would just flaunt his victory even more.
"Fine," she said reluctantly, reaching into her pocket and pulling out the van keys. "But I want them back as soon as the rematch is over."
Colton nodded, taking the keys from her with a smirk.
Don't worry, we'll take good care of it.
He turned to join Mr. Rence and Zach, who had started walking away, leaving Amy and Miss Peel fuming at the unfairness of it all. Once the boys were out of earshot, Amy turned to Miss Peel, frustration bubbling to the surface.
"I can't believe I just handed them over. Rence has no right to that van."
I know, Miss Peel replied, her brow furrowed in thought. But we need to think strategically. If we're going to get that van away from him once and for all, we need a solid plan. He's not just a good player, he's the most hazardous driver out there. We can't let him have it, especially if he's going to drive it recklessly.
"Exactly. We need to show everyone what he's really like behind the wheel," Amy said, her voice rising with determination. "If we can prove he's dangerous, maybe we can convince others to side with us. We can't let him use that van to intimidate or endanger anyone."
Miss Peel's eyes lit up with an idea.
What if we gather some evidence? We could film him driving, show everyone how reckless he is. We could use that in our next game. It's not just about the cards, it's about proving our point.
"Great idea," Amy exclaimed, her excitement growing. "We can set up a camera near the area where he usually drives. If we catch him in the act, we'll have something solid to use against him."
They began to brainstorm, tossing around ideas on how to catch Rence in his reckless behavior. They talked about the best locations to set up the camera, what times he usually drove, and how they could make sure they were hidden from view. As their plan took shape, Amy felt a renewed sense of purpose.
"We're not just going to get that van back. We're going to put an end to Rence's reign of terror on the road. He won't see us coming."
Exactly, Miss Peel agreed, her excitement matching Amy's. We'll show him that underestimating us was his biggest mistake. Let's make this happen.
With their plan solidified, the two friends felt a surge of determination. They were ready to take action and reclaim not just the van, but their dignity and safety, ensuring that Mr. Rence would think twice before challenging them again. The rematch was just around the corner, and they were prepared to fight for what was right.
Colton approached Mr. Rence with confidence, a grin plastered across his face as he held out the van keys. "Hey, Rence, I finally recovered these," he said, handing over the keys with a flourish. "Congratulations on winning the match. I knew you could pull it off, along with Zach and Chris."
Mr. Rence took the keys with a smirk, his eyes gleaming with triumph.
"Thanks, Colton. It was a piece of cake, really. Those two never stood a chance."
"I love the adventures we go on together," Colton continued, his enthusiasm evident. "Sure, you might drive a little crazy sometimes, but that's what makes you unique, right? I mean, who else can make a regular drive feel like a high-speed chase?"
Rence chuckled, slapping Colton on the back.
"Exactly, it's all about the thrill. Who wants boring when you can have excitement? Just wait until our next adventure. It's going to be epic."
Zach joined in, his voice filled with excitement. "I can't wait! With Rence behind the wheel, every trip is an adrenaline rush. I feel sorry for Amy and Miss Peel. They'll never understand the fun we have."
Colton nodded in agreement, his focus on Rence and his friends.
"They think it's all about playing it safe, but sometimes you have to take risks to really live. That's what sets us apart."
As they laughed and joked among themselves, the camaraderie of their friendship felt strong. Colton reveled in the unity he felt with Rence, Zach, and Chris, unaware of the brewing storm between their group and Amy and Miss Peel. Meanwhile, the girls were plotting their next move, determined to reclaim not just the van, but their agency in this escalating rivalry. As the boys continued to celebrate their victory, Colton couldn't shake the feeling that their adventures weren't just about the thrill, but also about the bonds they were forming. He loved being part of this group, even if it meant siding with someone like Mr. Rence, who thrived on chaos. Little did he know that the real adventure was just beginning and that the stakes were about to get even higher.